Hey everyone, welcome to CF Online. I'm really glad you're here today. And before we get started, I just want to take a moment to name the week we're heading into. Thanksgiving is almost here, which means that some of you are already traveling, some of you are getting ready to cook enough food for an army, and some of you are just trying to make sure the smoke alarm stays quiet this year. But wherever you fall, I hope this week brings moments of rest, moments of connection, and if you are traveling, we're praying for safety and smooth plans for you. I also know that this holiday can bring some anxiety. For some of you, the thought of being around family feels complicated. For others, the pressure to host or cook or clean can feel like a lot. And then some of you may not have family nearby, or this season actually reminds you of the people you miss. And if that's you, I want you to hear me when I say that you're not forgotten, you belong here, and we are just so super grateful to share this space here with you. And since November is Native American Heritage Month here in the United States, we also want to pause and acknowledge the first peoples of this land. We honor their history and their resilience and their ongoing contributions. It's good, it's healthy for us to remember the people with whom we share this place. And then as we continue today, I also want to thank those of you who give financially to support the mission of Cornerstone, because your generosity makes ministry possible in ways that you may never ever see, but it makes a real difference in the lives of others. So if you consider this church kind of your church home and you want to join us in that mission, you'll find the link right here on the screen and in the chat. Thank you for being part of what God is doing. And then in a moment, we're going to go to part 2 of our series, Scapegoats. And Chris Stockhaus is here to teach, and it is, as you can expect from him, it's thoughtful, it's timely, and I think it'll also challenge us in some really good ways today. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome to Cornerstone Fellowship.
When I was young, I thought I had the best family ever. However, in high school, my family started to fracture a bit, and we went through some hard things. My little sister had been the difficult child in our family, and so I blamed her for the issues in my family. I scapegoated my younger sister. Come to find out, years later, the problems my family were going through were not related to my younger sister at all. Other things were going on that I was completely unaware of at the time. And the scapegoating of my younger sister hurt her deeply. I regret the way I treated her. I mean, she really drew the short straw in getting me as her older brother, unfortunately. I mean, at that point in life, the only power I had was over my younger sister. And I misused that power and victimized her. Well, with that confession, welcome to part 2 in our series titled Scapegoats. Last time, we discussed how scapegoating became a common way of life with those in power, where those in power would project fear, blame, and shame onto vulnerable people or groups. The victim would then carry the burden of everyone's guilt. It's one of the most destructive instincts, the desire to blame, to find someone to carry our guilt, our tension, and our fear. From schoolyards to political platforms, the pattern repeats. When conflict rises or when things go wrong, someone has to take the fall. Humankind has participated in this cycle of blaming and excluding the outsider to maintain a false sense of peace and security for thousands of years. This human tendency builds walls that divide people, leading to oppression and exclusion. And God has some strong feelings about this stuff. He doesn't like it when we blame or scapegoat others. Listen to what God says in the book of Amos. He says, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your worship songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps, but let justice flow on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Wow, those are powerful words. They're found in Amos chapter 5, starting verse 21. Amos was a prophet around 760 BC. This was after King David and Solomon, but before the exile, that part of Israel's history. This was a time of peak prosperity for Israel, especially in the northern kingdom. It was also a time of terrible injustice and mistreatment of the poor. It's kind of discouraging how those two things usually go hand in hand, unfortunately. And we may be living through a time period that's similar in some ways to where Israel was at back then. It was a time of religious fervor for them. None of their neighbors were threatening their country, so it was very peaceful. They had time and money to participate in numerous religious activities and festivals. They worked hard to follow most of the rules God laid out in the Old Covenant, and they felt pretty good about themselves because they figured they were doing a pretty good job of keeping the rules. But God saw how the poor were being treated and exploited. God saw the corruption that was built into the system, which was hurting so many people. So he sent Amos to confront the powerful leaders of Israel. This is where we find this beautiful set of verses that reveal so much about God's heart. You know, God couldn't care less about our Sunday morning worship sets and sermons that study the Bible if the rest of the week we're building up walls to divide people, to scapegoat people in a way that creates injustices. It seems to me he'd rather us not even meet on Sunday until we figure out how to come alongside the outsider, the people in our community who haven't had a fair shake in life. This theme runs throughout the Old Testament, but it culminates in the words and actions of Jesus. Let's jump to Luke chapter 4, verse 18, where Jesus says this. He kind of gives his mission statement for his ministry. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoner and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Then he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down, and the eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. He said, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." This is Jesus in his hometown of Nazareth announcing the beginning of his ministry and laying out his mission statement for what he is on earth to do. He says he's on earth to, 1, lift up the poor, 2, provide freedom for the prisoner, 3, heal the blind, and 4, lift up the oppressed. 4 groups of scapegoated people. 4 groups of people that the powerful, those in charge, continue to hold down. He then goes on over the next 2+ years to minister to every group of scapegoated people in Israel. He visits lepers. Lepers were blamed for spreading disease throughout Israel, so they were quarantined in poverty and in isolation. He visits the lame and the blind. These people were blamed for being the worst sinners, which is why God punished them with these physical ailments, proof of how sinful these people are. So they were ostracized. The most common scapegoat Jesus includes is women. Women were blamed for numerous things in Jewish society, but most frequently for tempting men to sin. So women were covered up and kept silent so as not to cause a man to stumble. But Jesus not only cares for them, but he also invites women to be among his disciples, giving them a voice, giving them leadership responsibilities. Jesus visits tax collectors. These people were scapegoated as the people causing economic troubles for Israel. But Jesus loves them and has them join and fund his new traveling missional community. Jesus ministers to Roman centurions. These people were scapegoated as causing all of the oppression that Israel was experiencing. But Jesus shows them mercy and grace. Jesus includes and reaches out to Samaritans. These are the enemies of the people of Israel at this time who were scapegoated for racial reasons. You see, Samaritans intermarried during the time of the exile, so they weren't considered pure Jews. I could go on and on, but you get the idea. And this isn't just some niche biblical point that Cornerstone finds interesting and kind of cutting edge biblical interpretation. No, this is central to who Jesus is. Our sin nature, something every human struggles with, compels us to scapegoat. If we have a semblance of power, wealth, comfort, or safety, we typically try to do whatever we can to maintain those things, including scapegoating others if we have to. If we don't have power or wealth or comfort or safety, we're often willing to scapegoat others in order to acquire those things. It's a cycle that Jesus is intent on breaking. And he has called each of us to partner with him to break this cycle. One thing I notice as I was studying this topic is that Jesus never called out all the different ways that the Roman Empire was oppressing and scapegoating different groups of people. And the Roman Empire was doing a lot of scapegoating. Isn't that interesting? It's as if, from my perspective, it's as if Jesus, for now, just accepts that this is what the world does. This is what empires of the world do. And he's not okay with Rome scapegoating because we know that he's going to eventually do something about it. But we do get a clear idea that his primary concern, the issue that angers him the most, is when it's the people of God scapegoating others. As Amos expressed at the beginning of this message, God hates it when his people participate intentionally or unintentionally in systems of scapegoating. Okay, so we see how much of a problem scapegoating is and how much God hates it during the Old Testament times and during Jesus' time on earth. But how does that apply to us today? Well, in many ways, we face the same issues Jesus faced in his time. And the problem burdens my heart. I see some corners of the American church more and more move towards the scapegoating of others, which means portions of the church are moving further from the heart and call of Jesus. Not all American churches, obviously, but too many of us are caught up in a movement called Christian nationalism. Maybe you've heard of this term, maybe you haven't. Here's a definition of Christian nationalism in America. It's a political ideology that merges Christian and American identities together, asserting that the United States was founded primarily as a Christian nation for the benefit of Christians. It believes that America has a special covenant with God, which it doesn't, and it advocates for privileging Christianity in legal and public life. It conflates being a true American with being a Christian. And it tries to make Christianity the dominant influence in government and in culture. Now, some of that, to some of you, may sound good on the surface, but it's precisely what the New Testament warns us against. You see, Jesus was tempted by Satan to blend together his faith with the acquisition of worldly power, and he resisted that temptation. Christian nationalism throughout church history has always led to disastrous consequences in whichever nation Christian nationalism has had power. Deeper within a Christian nationalist movement is usually an ethnocentric view of nations. This means that this view typically believes that nations should be ethnically pure. So like French people should live in France. Chinese people should live in China. Arab people should live in Arab countries, etc. This dimension of Christian nationalism is usually below the surface and often unseen, but there are times when it begins to expose itself. Hitler began with a German Christian nationalist worldview that reached its logical conclusion as he tried to make Germany more purely German, scapegoating and killing millions of Jews in the process. Unfortunately, we are seeing the Christian nationalist movement gain more and more momentum in America today, especially amongst young male Christians. Have you heard of a guy named Nick Fuentes? He's rising in popularity among Christians as an influential voice. He's a Christian nationalist who takes this worldview to the extreme. Nick repeatedly praises Hitler for what he did to the Jews. He calls for a holy war against Jewish people in America. Here's a quote from Nick that highlights his Christian nationalism in a way that divides out Jewish people in our country. He says this: America, for what it's worth, was founded by white Christians. It was not founded by Jewish people. It was not founded by Judeo-Christians. It was founded by white Christians. And white Christians are in the majority. Christianity is the religion of this nation, not Judaism, not the Talmud, not any of that stuff. It's just what it is. It's just a fact. If we want to restore America, we've got to make America a Christian nation again. He's also, among many things, notoriously sexist, saying this after the last presidential election. He said, "Women lose again. Your body, our choice. That ceiling is made out of brick." Unfortunately, there are so many quotes to choose from him, and these were just a couple of the tamer ones. But do you see how he is dividing people, scapegoating Jews and women in these two instances? He scapegoats everyone who is not male, white, straight, and Christian. This guy's the ultimate scapegoat artist, which is fine, whatever. I mean, there are a lot of bad people in the world. I expect the world to be the world. However, when it's Christians doing this stuff and it's a growing movement within the church, I get way more concerned. Now, the majority of Christian nationalists don't believe what Nick Fuentes believes. In fact, I think the majority of Christian nationalists don't really know what Christian nationalism is, and that's fine. They're mostly good people. You know, Christian nationalism, it's a sneaky thing because it can hide itself well. It can sound like good Bible teaching when you go to church. It gives us our ticket to heaven and works to provide us with worldly power at the same time, which sounds great on the surface, except it's a path that leads away from Jesus. In the early church, Jewish people who believed in Jesus struggled to adapt to the radical changes Jesus was leading them towards. You see, their whole lives, they were taught to think through a nationalistic and ethnic lens. They were taught to think that they were God's people because they were from the nation of Israel and because they were ethnically Jewish. Then Jesus changed this paradigm, and it was no longer about nation or about ethnicity. He eliminated those barriers. Anyone, regardless of nation or ethnicity, can be a part of God's coming kingdom. It's an unstoppable global movement that will break down barriers between nations, barriers between ethnicities and genders, bringing peace and unity amongst all people. Now, this can be confusing for a lot of us Christians today. I mean, where it comes from is Christian nationalism. It often arises out of a misapplication of the Old Testament. You know, Christians who kind of just get a Bible and they start trying to read the Old Testament and apply it and live it, they end up living under the mindset of the Old Covenant, which was a very nationalistic and ethnocentric covenant, which was fine for what God was doing in that time. But that covenant was between God and Israel. It was never a covenant with us today. It was never a covenant with America. Jesus brought that covenant to fulfillment. He closed it out and ushered in a new covenant that we live under today, a covenant for all people with no division between groups of people. Anything that is about building up national, ethnic, or any other barriers that divide people, about separating people as different and then blaming them because they are different, is a movement that is directly opposed to Jesus and his coming kingdom. Now, some may say, Chris, aren't you reverse scapegoating Christian nationalists? And I understand how it could come across that way, but no, I'm not. To shine a light on scapegoating is not the same as scapegoating. Jesus shone a spotlight and confronted those who were scapegoating in his time. And there are moments when we need to do the same thing. To be silent in the face of injustice can, at times, mean we're complicit in it. You know, I think another reason why I bring this up is that I'm particularly sensitive to issues of Christian nationalism because I've seen firsthand the damage this movement does to people. The maternal side of my family history is steeped in Christian nationalism. My family history on this side traces back to a plantation in the Deep South and the slave trade. That side of my family history was so good at drawing ethnic lines, scapegoating Black people in a way that deeply oppressed them, all the while proclaiming Jesus as their Lord and Savior. I told this story, I think I told it a few years ago in church. My maternal grandfather was deeply racist. To him, non-white people were always the problem in America. However, near the end of his life, he was able to hold my beautiful Black son when he was a baby shortly after we adopted him. It was a beautiful moment. And I believe that God was at work in my grandpa's heart, confronting the toxic aspects within him and in some ways restoring him. I grew up a Christian nationalist, and it's been a difficult process to learn how to untangle my Americanness from my identity in Christ, to learn that I'm a citizen of the kingdom of heaven first and foremost. Because of my story, I may be a bit more edge when I see this type of movement growing in power and influence within American churches. And just to be clear, this isn't an issue of politics for me. It's not about that at all. It's about how hard it is for me to see Jesus being distorted in a way that is so harmful to so many people. The people of God scapegoating others isn't just a problem that existed in Jesus' time. It's a growing problem in our time. And due to all this, we have a crucial role to play. It's our job to imitate Jesus in our time. And I see Jesus doing two things to combat this that we can emulate. First, he stood alongside and dignified those who were being scapegoated. This may be the most important step. But second, he directly confronted the people of God who were actively scapegoating others and building up these barriers. Now, Jesus also loved the people who were scapegoating. Jesus loved the Pharisees. He just felt like, obviously, by the way he handled himself, that the best way to love these scapegoaters, these Pharisees, was to confront them with some hard truths about what was actually going on and what they were actually doing. I'm really proud of our church for attempting to do these things just as Jesus did. I know we can continue to improve, and we've got a long way to go, but I'm proud of how far we've come. I see the way so many of you are sacrificing to help people who've had the deck stacked against them in life. It's incredible to see. This is why one of our values at Cornerstone is we seek to share our advantages with those who are less advantaged. This value represents the alternative to scapegoating. I also see so many of you welcoming anyone into our community. There are no walls or barriers that make people feel like outsiders here. I mean, at least I hope not. This is why one of our values at Cornerstone is we include everyone, especially those not like us. We're also learning how to find our voice to call out the ethnocentric or nationalistic versions of Christianity that are in opposition to what Jesus called the church to be. Not in a prideful way, but with grace and humility, but also with the truth and the courage that Jesus had. It's what Jesus did. You remember the story of when Jesus had dinner at a Pharisee's house and he wasn't welcome, they didn't help wash his feet or do any of the respectful things to Jesus? However, a woman who the Pharisees considered sinful and bad washed Jesus' feet with her tears, kissed his feet, and anointed them with perfume. The Pharisees were horrified. This woman embodies the epitome of societal problems. She represents all that is wrong with this country. and she should not be associated with. But do you remember Jesus' response? He honors and dignifies this woman. He forgives her. He shows her great mercy. But he doesn't stop there. He also addresses the scapegoating being exhibited by the Pharisees. He's disgusted by it, and he confronts it head on, speaking truth to those who have the power to victimize the powerless. My prayer is that we continue to do what Jesus does, and that we as the whole church, the big church, the global church, repent for the times when we chase after power or comfort and we scapegoat others to get that, and that we return to the sacrificial ways of Jesus, prioritizing those whom the world has said aren't worth it.
We are in part 2 of the series called Scapegoats, and this is the easy one, just easy like Sunday morning. That was a nice, light message.
Comforting.
Comforting. Actually, not really. There's a lot of heavy stuff in there, so let me start off light, okay?
Okay,
Since you spent all week long blaming and scapegoating as you're preparing for this message, what's one everyday thing that you now realize you blame too quickly? You know, I'm thinking about traffic or the dog or your kids or the coffee machine.
Not the dog. I never blame the dog.
What do you scapegoat most at your house?
It's me scapegoating. Like,
you
getting
blame
upset at a group of people. It's usually sports related for me.
Yeah.
It's umpires,
So
like Stephen Gold told the story, or it's Dodger fans, or it's some group like that that's just usually not good people that probably deserve it, but that's my go-to.
You don't have like the dog that you scapegoat for,
No.
the fact that you're late or that you're...
No.
It's always the dang dog.
No, I don't have the dog.
Okay.
The dog's great. The kids can be tough, but the dog's great.
Isn't that? We can all agree with that. Hey, you're studying psychology right now, and just the thing, developing thought. Okay, don't blame me. But
Okay.
what do you think is behind these tendencies for humans to look around for others to blame, to put down, to cast out? Is it to mask our insecurities, or do you truly think it's cynical enough to know that we're really all playing capture the flag and we're working out to get more power, more influence, more money? What do you?
Yeah, I don't think it's as explicitly evil. I think it's more accidental. I think it's just a reflex more to, I think masking insecurity is a good way of putting it. I don't think we're consciously like, I'm gonna scapegoat these people because I'm a bad person. I think it's something we do more subconsciously and just naturally as a way to protect ourselves, right? From like feelings we have of that are too heavy to bear, maybe our guilt or shame from sin or things that have gone wrong or fears about the future. All of these things can be really threatening to how we feel, and so we need to put those somewhere. And so that's, but those aren't some things that we're always like thinking about or aware of. It's just something that we're doing, and there's usually a group of people who sometimes they've hurt us or they're just in the way somehow of where we want to try to get, and so they're the easiest way for us to place all that's going on a group of other people.
And it's so dangerous, especially if the place that you want to go is a good place. Then it's easy to just start looking for...
We all want to have a life that has more influence, which would then be power, or more comfort or security, right? Nobody votes for like, I want to have less security in my life, right? And so we all have this like innate desire for these things, which on the surface aren't necessarily bad in and of themselves. It's just when they become such a priority, they actually become more a priority than people. And
Totally.
And we're not even really conscious of that. It's just
No, it's frustrating. To me, it feels a little bit like you throw, things at me, like to get me to think of others as the ones to blame or the ones that are probably at fault. And I find that I'm just made of Velcro. Like it just sticks to me, and I'm like, wait, hang on, how am I like this? But I'm as susceptible as anybody to think like that. I think I have the same tendencies as even as somebody who wants to be brainwashed into the way of Jesus. I don't love that. but that's a good answer. You talked about how Jesus moves toward people who are overlooked or blamed. For those of us who are trying to follow Jesus today, and you've joined us here today, what has helped you, Chris, to recognize the people that you may not even realize that you're avoiding, or how have you trained your eyes to see those whom love requires us to move towards?
I don't know how much I actually have. I mean, I think I'm still trying to figure out how to do that. I think.
But why you taught this message? I figured you've got it all worked out.
It doesn't mean I've perfected it. I mean,
Okay.
how much of my day am I kind of thinking about what I need to get done and what my schedule is and the things that stress me out and my fears and my right?
Right.
And so I'm still on journey with everyone else of figuring out how do I walk down the street and not be thinking about me and be aware of that's hard for me to do. I'm not a super aware person. Like my mind's always running and I'm not a super aware. So I miss things that are happening around me. I miss people that are in need or you could tell they're hurting, but I'm not telling that they're hurting because I'm not even really paying attention. Like that's me all the time. And so, yeah, this is a huge growth area on a small scale. I think I've grown in awareness of like the societal scale of what's happening.
Okay.
And kind of injustices built into the system that, and the way that it hurts people and what is the church's role in that, right? And how do we advocate for people and come alongside people who have had the deck of cards stacked against them? I think I'm growing in my awareness of that, but I have a long way to go just on like my day-to-day interactions.
You shine the flashlight on those systemic issues, but to shine a flashlight in your daily life as you're walking around is maybe not part of your, or
I can get a lot better at that, for sure.
We value here at church that sharing our advantage with those who have less. For someone who hears this message today and wants to begin breaking patterns of scapegoating in their life, what's just one small step that they could take this week to share strength or dignity with those who need it?
I think what's cool about Jesus is he was never worried that he wouldn't have enough power or security or comfort. Like he had those in abundance for all eternity, right? And so he was so secure in who he was and his future that he didn't need to like grab for like, oh my gosh, I need to. Yeah. And so there was no threat to him to come alongside anyone. They just posed no threat to him because he was so secure in who he was and what his future was.
I want to be like that.
I want to be like that too. So like for us, I mean, I think, okay, what fears do we have that make us feel like our people need to have more power and more influence? Because if we don't, then we're going to get run over by other people. And so we got to fight. And like all those fears we have that cause us to like grapple for, which ends up causing us to like push other people down. That's the journey of working on like, how do we calm those fears and realize that no, God has promised us all things.
Yeah.
All the wealth of the kingdom of heaven, all the peace and joy of the kingdom of heaven is becoming ours. And we could bank on that.
That's very hopeful. I love that. So let's just take one step, church. Why don't we this week, maybe we can just choose one person that we normally overlook or avoid and then move toward them with the kindness of Jesus, see their humanity, stop to listen, offer dignity. Maybe that's a friend or a coworker or a neighbor, a family member, I don't know, someone in the margins of your world, perhaps. And I believe that if each one of us did this, even once a week, I think Cornerstone would slowly become a place where people who feel invisible finally feel seen and belong. I think that walls that divide us would begin to soften. I'm that idealistic. I really think that supernaturally we can get there and we would look a little bit more like the community that Jesus imagined, where every person knows they matter. Wouldn't that be incredible? So as we wrap up, I want to give you one question to sit with, about something that you heard just now. You can talk about it with the person next to you. You can drop it in the chat. You can send it to a friend or use it as the starting point for your own journal today. Take a moment with it wherever you are. Here it is. Who is one person, you can think of a name, that you've been overlooking? And what small act of kindness could I offer them this week? Hey, I'm so glad you're here on this journey with us, and I can't wait to see you next time.